this past year. Right, I'm going to share my screen. So this seminar is starting new worshiping communities. So it's going to be an introduction to starting new worshiping communities. We're going to look at a few different types. We're going to consider kind of a compass you might kind of need as you think about it, some questions to ask yourself, and we're also going to think about some next steps for you guys as well. So that's what we're going to be covering over the next 40 minutes. To kick off, just a couple of questions. What's your favorite thing about church, and who would you like to share it with? So what's your favorite thing about church, and who would you like to share it with? So I don't know if we come out of screen share a minute. Anyone want to chip in on that? What's your favorite thing about church, and who would you like to share it with? Maybe let's tackle that first question first. What's your favorite thing about church?
The community.
Yeah, same with me. Same me.
Yeah, so community, fellowship,
yeah,
friendships, yeah.
Yeah.
Is Jesus the right answer?
Jesus is always the right answer. Yeah, Jesus.
Don't start getting all holy and pious, Mr. Buttress.
Any other thing? Anything else? Sorry, Jerry, did you say something?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Sorry.
Or did you say something?
No, I didn't. No, so I just wanted to be with you. We're done. That's all.
Any other things that people might say is their favorite thing about church? Community?
I suppose sometimes the sort of atmosphere, as in reflective atmosphere and prayerful atmosphere.
Yeah, so that kind of, that feeling when you're at church or in a worship event or something, and actually something moves you kind of at a deeper level. Is that kind of thing you're talking about, George? That kind of reflective? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was thinking about worshipping together with others is really lovely. It's like worship and the whole community thing, really.
Yeah. Someone the other day said to me, oh, sorry, who was speaking? Sharing. Yeah. Someone was saying to me the other day that people who go to church live longer, and that was something I'd never really considered before. And I guess it must be something to do with that communal thing, but also something about people who sing live longer as well, which is again another interesting thing. So sharing. Any other things?
It's one of the things that I like about church is the fact that I've discovered something and I want to tell other people. That sense of wow.
Yeah,
that's it.
So almost like a purpose. You've just discovered a purpose in life and you want to share it with someone else. Yeah, good. Like it. Which leads us on to our next question, I think, which is a good question. Who would you want to share it with?
Everyone.
Everyone. So so Danny, you're quite a good example. You've got a Spanish network that you, because of being a Spanish speaker in Ipswich, and you're considering starting up this Spanish congregation, aren't you? So there's that specific group that you want to share your faith with. Yeah. How about other people?
We would, at St Thomas's, we would certainly want to share it, and we're looking at putting a community up in the White House industrial estate. That's remote, although it's in our parish, it's remote for the church, and they're not going to come to us. And Malcolm and myself have got a couple of contacts who are keen, and that's obviously for COVID reasons, the fact they're working at home and other things has gone on the back burner, but that's a sort of long-term possibility we're looking at.
Right.
It would be based on people sort of coming in at lunchtime from an industrial estate.
So for those of you who don't know, St Thomas's Church is right at the edge of their parish. So the church is here, and then there's a whole parish, and this estate is right at the other end of the parish. Is that right, Stephen? Yeah, so right at the other end. So they're thinking of ways how they can connect in a different part of their parish, because they recognise that people not necessarily going to wander down on a Sunday morning quite a long way, isn't it, Stephen?
Yeah,
from one end of your parish to the other.
And
so yeah.
Of course, those who work on the estate won't be there on the Sunday anyway. So this would probably be a weekday thing we would try and do.
Yeah. Great. Anyone else got a specific community or group or network or person, just an individual in mind that you'd love to share something of your experience with church to that person?
Pop-up shop.
Yeah.
Pop-up shop, sorry. Sue, is that you, Sue?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. The community of people that you've been serving at St. Francis for a long time now, and you just love to share your faith with them. You'll share something of your church experience with them. Yeah.
We've got a nursery working in as part of or using part of a building, and we've been wanting to sort of connect with them, but then pandemic and everything happened.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Great. Just go back into screen share 1 second. So those questions, they're really good questions, and it's a slightly different question to maybe what you might ordinarily ask about what would you share about your own individual faith, and there's just a reason for that, and we'll come back to those questions a bit later. Thank you so much for taking part in that, and for sharing some of the things you talked about. So what is a new worshipping community? Broadly speaking, there are multiple types. So we might think about a church plant as a new worshipping community. So we've got Bridge and River and Limburg Road, examples here in Ipswich. We're not specifically focusing on them today. We're focusing more specifically on slightly smaller new congregations. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of the type we're kind of focusing on today. So one example might just be that you're doing a service at a new time. So it might be you have a Holy Communion service on a Wednesday, for example. And it might be you deliberately choose to do that because something else is happening in your building on that day. So for example, if you've got a pop-up shop or something else, a midweek group, and actually you decided maybe we could connect in with these people by putting on something that day. And it might not be a formal communion service, it might be a different type of service, but you just had an inkling that might be a good thing to do. Another type, maybe it's a new kind of a fresh expression or a new worshipping community. It's attached to your parish. So for example, Messy Church. I imagine many of you are familiar with Messy Church. So it might be something that you use the church facilities for or use a space in the community for, but it's very much part of your church life. So Messy Church or Cafe Church, or a youth congregation as well. So something that's part of your church's life, but it's a new thing, and it's really shaped around the interests of that particular group. So Messy Church is for families. It's really focused around that, for example. And then finally, maybe it could be aimed at a network, and maybe it's not actually fundamentally just about what's in your parish, but a network of people across the whole town or the whole area. So this picture here, pub church. So this is a beer and hymns event in a church, and in a pub, and that's one example of another type of new worshipping community. Is not specifically attached to a church building or a parish church, but actually is aimed at a network. So in some ways, Danny, you're kind of crossing over with your Spanish church idea, because that's multiple of these, isn't it? And I think they do overlap, and there's not barriers between these 3, but these are 3 specific types of churches, new congregations that we're going to be exploring now. And you guys could be exploring in your context as well. I'm going to hand over to Alicia now, and she's going to carry this a bit further forward.
Thank you. Yes, so when we're thinking about starting something new, starting a new worshipping community, the first place we need to start is by loving people. And it's really interesting this. We start by loving people because that's where Jesus starts, isn't it? That he reaches out and helps people. And sometimes we might think, we'll start something new, but it's actually better to start by loving people and relating to them, and then to create something. So we talk about the love, relate, create journey rather than create, relate, love. So can we go on to the next slide, Andy? That would be lovely, thank you. So to begin with, we want to listen to God. And it's so exciting to think that God is actually doing stuff already in our communities. And it's a question of us finding out what he's doing already and thinking, how can we join in? What can we do? And you might say, well, how do I listen to God? Well, we begin by prayer and we ask God to help us to listen to him. So we can pray, we can say, God, please will you speak to me in all sorts of ways. Please will you give me ideas? Please will you speak to me in the conversations I have with other people? Sometimes God speaks to us when we're reading the Bible, that sort of thing, directly. And so really prayerfully considering what is God doing and asking him to show us. Thanks. And also we need to listen to our local community. So what are the needs around us? In our church at St. Peter's, Stoke Park, we decided that we would start a pop-up shop because there's an area of significant poverty around the church. And so that was a really obvious need, particularly in COVID times. And it's great that we're doing something which I know that Jesus would love. Jesus does love, because he's so concerned about the last, the least, and the lost. So it's well worth thinking about what are the needs around us? What do we need to, what is God wanting us? What's God calling us to do? Thank you. So we begin with loving service. So how can we love and serve those people around you? And there might be, you say some people have a passion for mental health, mental well-being. And it may be that that's an area that you're interested in. It may be children and families, something like that. Maybe there's a local school where you can do something to really encourage families and the teachers, that sort of thing. Quite a few churches across Ipswich are giving out messy church bags this Easter. Altogether, there's going to be something like 390 bags given out across Ipswich. And that's just quite a straightforward way to love and serve the people around you. One of the most important things to remember is that when people come to faith, often what precedes that, what a first step is that they come to trust a Christian. And so that's a really crucial thing, that we're loving people and that they can trust somebody. They can trust someone who says they're a Christian. Thank you. The next step is to build community with people. And I was really struck at the question that Andy was asking a few minutes ago, and so many of us said that the community of our churches is what we love. And I think an awful lot of people who don't belong to a church have no idea about the beauty of Christian community and about how the church really can be our family in a different way from birth families. So building community is the next stage. And it's wonderful when people feel that they belong. So many people are hungry for that. And I think we've got such an opportunity now with coming out of COVID, when people have been isolated, and coming into a community is just going to be such an exciting thing for so many people. And also, you need to find a team. So it's really important to do this with other people. God created us to be in community. God created us to lead together. And of course, that's fantastic, because then you have different gifts. People working together is much more fun, isn't it, than doing things on your own. Thank you. And then as trust deepens, we're able to share Jesus. So we're able to ask people if they would like us to pray for them, that sort of thing. And often what happens is people are aware of Christians being a bit different. Christians perhaps being more loving, more caring than other people they've come to know. And one of the things when you are starting something new is to pray for opportunities to talk about Jesus, to pray for opportunities to tell people how great Jesus is and how much he loves them, and also to draw people into prayer. Thank you. So when we're forming a new Christian community, that might be in all sorts of different ways. So it might be like a green church, it might be a dinner church, it might be a messy church, it might be a Renew Wellbeing Cafe, it might be a church service at a different time. All sorts of possibilities. It could be a men's group, or doing something after a toddler group. Lots and lots of different possibilities. And it's so exciting to think that God created each of us with passions and the desire to reach out in different ways. And there's all sorts of possibilities. One of the things I'm really excited about at the moment is Renew Wellbeing. And this is a real opportunity, I think, particularly for churches where there's pop-up shops, but in other areas as well. And it's just a chance to be to have community with other people, and also to be invited into a very simple prayer space. Thank you. And if we go round the circle, start by listening to God, listening to our community, listening to the needs around us. We do the loving service, and just a note there that we love everybody. We're not loving people in order for our churches to grow. We're loving people regardless of the reaction that they have, whether they might say, no, I'm not interested in faith. That's absolutely fine. We still go on loving them, building community, sharing Jesus, forming church, forming a new worshipping community. And then the exciting thing is that the new believers repeat the cycle. We've just become grandparents, and it's so exciting to see our children now becoming parents. And this is the whole thing, that then once we've come round full circle, then we can start again. Thank you, Andy.
Great, thanks, Alicia. So I'm going to introduce you to a compass now, and this compass is really to keep you on track. So if you are thinking of starting a new worshipping community, there are kind of 4 areas or 4 questions that I think it'd be really good to ask yourself. And these 4 questions or 4 areas are missional, contextual, formational, and ecclesial. And those words are probably it might sound a bit complex and probably not the most helpful, and hopefully I'm going to unpack them now and make them a bit more understandable. What do I really mean by those things? So the first one is missional. So if you are thinking of starting a new thing, this for me is a really key question, and it's really the question I asked you earlier. Who is it that you're seeking to engage with? And I think the reason why this question is so kind of crucial is because if you don't have a clear idea in mind of who you're trying to engage with, it's quite possible that you'll hit exactly the same clientele that you're hitting now, which is the people who go to your church. And I think we have to all own the fact that our churches, however broad we try and make their appeal, they will appeal to a certain group of people with a certain group of interests or personality or whatever it is, class, social background, all those kind of things. Generally speaking, our churches attract people from a similar grouping. And hopefully they do attract people from quite a broad group, but it won't hit everyone in Ipswich, for example. We're never going to do that as an individual church. That's not our calling. It's not possible. But what it is possible is when there are multiple of us around the place, all aiming and all kind of having a real clear vision to reach people. So Danny's Spanish church, for example, there's very few of us here will be able to go to that Spanish church. Although I can see Sam there on the bunch of the screen, he might be able to go. But yeah, generally speaking, most of us will not be able to join that because we don't speak Spanish. And I think that's true of many of these things. So have a really clear idea of who is it you're seeking to engage with. So again, pop-up shop, it's those people at the pop-up shop and keeping it them in focus in all your planning and everything else. So the second one is contextual. So how are we going to communicate the good news in a way that these people can understand and relate to? How do we keep it, how do we make it understandable and relatable to this group of people? So if you go back to that first question, who is it? This second question follows on. How do we make it understandable? So again, Danny's Spanish church, if he does it in English, it's not relatable. And actually, think about it in that way, that's a really good example again, isn't it? And if you think about children, I think that's what the success of Messy Church is about. It's about how do we make the gospel understandable to these children? Do we expect them to sit down and listen to a monologue sermon for half an hour? Or do we invite them into discovering what God is like by playing games, by craft, by stories, by drama? That's what this is about. It's about being contextual, about relating the gospel to this group of people. And then the third question, formational. How are we going to form these people as disciples of Jesus? What are the next steps for these people? And again, that will be very dependent on the group of people that you choose. It's generally going to be the same kind of thing. It's going to involve prayer. It's going to involve scripture. It's going to involve kind of all those kind of things that we've all kind of developed ourselves as Christians. But it's going to be in the language and in the way that people can understand as well. So I think we can be creative about that as well. I don't think we need to just, obviously, to be honest, much creativity is just going back into the past and rediscovering old things. I think we can do that. And I think we don't have to just do what we've always done. I think we can be creative. And then the last question, I think it's quite an important question, is how will you connect what you're doing into the wider church? How am I going to make sure that this is not just a thing that goes off and does its own thing? How am I going to ensure that this is something which is really rooted in the church, the wider church? So, for example, one way I've done this in the past is I had a youth group I worked with and kind of working quite kind of on the side of a traditional parish church, but it was quite disconnected in many ways. So I just thought about how can I connect these two things up? So what I did was I asked the vicar of the church just to come along every now and again, every month, and just do a very simple communion service with them. And that, in some ways, it's a very simple act, but it just made them, this group of young people I was working with, connect in with the wider church. I think that's a really important question. So I'm just going to go through those again very quickly. So you've got missional. Who is it you're seeking to engage with? Contextual. How are you going to communicate the good news in a way that is relatable and understandable to these people? Formational. How are we going to form these people? For those that are interested, of course, how are we going to inform them as disciples of Jesus? And ecclesial. How will you connect with what you're doing with the wider church? How are you going to root it in something bigger than yourself? So I just think that those questions I asked you earlier, what's your favorite thing about church? But more specifically, that second one, who is it you'd love to share that with? I think if you just ask yourselves those questions and think about ways that you can do that. So the pop-up shop, the Spanish church, those examples you thought of, what is it in your context? What would it look like? And just kind of use that grid, those questions as a compass to keep you on track. And I think keep coming back to those questions, keep coming back to them and say, are we being contextual here? Are we communicating in a way that these people can understand? Are we being missional? Are we actually trying to reach out to people beyond the church? Or just doing something for existing members? How are we forming these people as disciples? And how are we connect it in with the wider church? I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes now just to reflect, just have a bit of a pause and reflect on those questions. And maybe have a think about things that you talked about as a learning community today and have a think about what's stirring in your own heart. about people that maybe you feel called to in some way, and just kind of maybe go through these questions in your own mind. So I'm just going to mute myself and give you 3 minutes to do that. Okay, if I just draw everyone back together. So I hope that's been helpful, and I hope something's been stirring in you. And just want to draw your attention again to the seed funding that we mentioned earlier. So the innovation fund, which is those small grants of up to £200, which just might help you as you start something like this. So if you need some equipment or something that would help you do this, go through this process, then do chat to Alicia, myself, Bob, or Karen, and we will very happily help you with that. I'm just going to hand over to Alicia, who's got some potential other next steps as well.
Thank you. Lovely. So these next steps are as easy as A, B, C, D. And so the first tip is ask a friend. Have a chat with someone. See if someone in your church has a similar idea to you, has the same passion as you, and chat about it is a really great place to start. And it's so good, isn't it, when we talk to other people and hear their ideas. And the next one for B is begin with what you've got. Now, it may be that you have got a big space like that one on the screen. It may be that you've got other physical things that you can offer. Maybe that you have a beautiful church building, all sorts of different possibilities. But also think about what soft things you have, what skills there are. So it may be that you have a particular empathy for people who are living in poverty, and that you have a real passion to help children, something like that. All sorts of different possibilities. And think about what skills you might be able to access when you're putting together a team. So it's great, isn't it, just to think, wow, what has God given us that we can use to help us to get this idea to become a reality. Thank you. The third step, C, is chat about the possibilities with others. I don't know about you, but I found this morning when the learning communities were feeding back incredibly exciting, and all sorts of ideas across Ipswich which are happening. And it's a great opportunity to think, oh yes, that church talked about something really interesting that I might like to do in my church. And I think that's one of the beauties of Inspiring Ipswich, that we can get ideas from others, share skills, that sort of thing. So do chat with others, not only in your church, but beyond your church. And also chat with us pioneers, Bob or Andy or me. We'd be very happy, be thrilled to talk to you about how to get something off the ground. And then the D is discover your next steps. So it's really asking God to help you think about what next. I'm reading a great book at the moment, which is called Living His Story. It's actually the Archbishop of Canterbury's Lent book this year. And it's all about helping people to discover Jesus. And there was one part in it which I thought was really inspiring. I'm just going to read you a small section. My friend Liz works for a large accounting firm, and one Holy Week she took some hot cross buns into work and left them in the communal kitchen. She then sent an email around to everyone in her department saying that they were probably aware that she was a Christian, and so Holy Week was an important time for her as she reflected on Jesus' death. She said she wanted to share this special time with her colleagues, and so had left the hot cross buns as a treat for people to enjoy in break times. She also signed off by saying that if anyone wanted to talk with her about what her Christian faith meant to her, she was really happy to chat. Liz received a positive response, with lots of her colleagues replying to her email, saying they appreciated the gesture, and others stopping by her desk to talk with her. Such initiatives do not have to be huge. When we start to view our workplace, and I would say other networks as well, as an out there place of missional encounter, it opens the door for witnessing. Now, I don't know what happened next in that story. Maybe she started a workplace prayer group. Maybe she decided to meet with others and have a well-being group. Maybe it helped someone else to come out as a Christian. Maybe there were other Christians in her workplace who hadn't actually dared say they were a Christian. And it opens up conversations. And did you notice it all started by her doing something lovely by bringing in the hot cross buns? And so being brave and doing something like that can have all sorts of consequences. Another story about a parent at a primary school who offered to go into the school and just pray before school on a Monday morning. And just on her own, she didn't do it with anyone else. And gradually, more and more staff kept asking her, could you pray about so-and-so? And the head, who hadn't been a Christian, actually ended up becoming a Christian. And so just a really simple thing like that, ways of serving people, can then lead on to starting something. So we're just going to have about a minute now to think about what your next steps are, and to think too about, we have a couple of minutes for that, and then we're going to see if there's any questions.